Shri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha. Dasakam 22. Ajamila Upakyanam. Meaning. Stanza 1. Ajamilo nama mahisurah pura charan vibho dharma patan grihashrami guror gira kananametya drishtavan sudhrishta shilam kulatam madakulam. So just like how Dashakam 17, Bhagavan came to help Dhruva. So this is another instance where Bhagavan comes to help another devotee. So to prove the strength of devotional service of Bhakti Yoga, so Sukadeva, who was explaining Bhagavatam, described the story of Ajamila to Parikshit. Ajamila was a resident of kind of the modern Kannauj, North India. So he was trained by his parents to become a perfect Brahmin by studying all the Vedas and following all the principles. So in this Pura, a long time back, Ajamila Nama Mahisura, there was a Brahmin by name Ajamila, Grihashrami, who was a householder. So he had got married. He did all his rites. Charan Vibho Dharma Patan. So he was actually following a very righteous life. So he had practiced all the right things as a Brahmin, and then he was also leading a proper life with his wife and with his parents. So one day, at the request of his father, he went to the forest to get some darbai for the homam. There, he saw Drishtwan Sudrishta Sheelam. He saw an immodest, so not of the high virtues, Kulatam, an immoral woman. He saw in Kulatam and this immodest and immoral woman, Madakulam, who was used to, who was drinking. So he saw this lady when he was in the forest collecting some things for his father. Stanza 2. Swatah prashantopi tadha hridhashayah swadharmamutsrajya taya samaraman adharmakari dashami bhavan punah dhadhau bhavan namayute sute ratim. Remembering, the instructions that he had learned from the scriptures and everything, Ajamila tried not to gaze at the women. So he strained to kind of control his lusty desires with the help of the knowledge he had and the intellect he had. But then eventually it gave up, right? And he failed. And as a result of that, he lost all his good senses. So in the days that followed, he always thought about this lady. And then, in short span of time, he took her as a servant in his house, then abandoned all his, Brahminical principles that he was following. And then he also started spending a lot of money he had inherited from his father on various gifts to satisfy her. And then he got addicted to a lot of other activities. Eventually, he left his family and then, went with her. And then he then made a living by supporting his family by actually blackmailing a lot of people by cheating, fraud, gambling. And then over 80 years, span of 80 years, he fathered 10 sons. And all Bhattadripad says, that's the backstory, but all Bhattadripad says here is Swada Prashantaha, although he was very self-controlled by nature, he got attracted to her. Swadharmam Utsrujya, he gave up all his duties, and then to enjoy her company, he became Adharmakari, he became unrighteous. Then Puna Dashami Bhavan, then when he became very old, right, the last son that he had, the 10th son that he had, Bhavat Nama Sute Yute. So he gave the last son your name, which means he named him as Narayana. So that's just stanza 2. Stanza 3. Samrityukale Yamaraja Kinkaran Bhayankaram Strina Bilakshayan Bhiyam Puramanak Twatsmriti Vasana Balate Juhavanarayana Namakam Sutam. Samrityukale, so the time of his death, when the death time comes, Abhilakshan, he sees in front of him Bhayankaran Treen Bhayankaran. He sees 3 very fierce people who are Yamaraja Kinkaran, who are messengers of Yama, who have actually come to take him away right now. So naturally, right, he's very afraid. In fear, he calls Narayaneeyam Sutam. He calls his last son, who was his most favorite son, Narayana. So he yells out the name Narayana several times, trying to call out his last son. And here, Bhattacharya says, Twat Smriti Vasana Bhalat. So, from long time, Puramana, from long time, due to the strength of the memory of the devotion, right? So, the devotion that he used to have on the Lord before, the memory and all the prayers and all the worships and everything he has done in earlier in his life, there is still some residual, instinct stuff left in it, and that's the reason he automatically called out to his son's name, the last one, Narayana. So that's why, again, the important point here is it's very difficult to say I'm going to skip everything and then when I'm about to die I'm going to call Krishna or Narayana, because it naturally will not come. There are so many things that are going through one person's mind when something like that happens. But here the only reason Ajamila was able to call out that word Narayana was because of all the punyam and everything that he's done earlier in his life and all the devotion that he already had. So stanza 4. Durashayasyapi tadatvanirgatattvadiyanamaksharamatravaibbhavat purobipeturbhavadiyya parshadaha chaturbhujah pitapatha manoramaha. So when he calls out the word Narayana several times, Durashayasyapi, he was a very evil-minded person. Even though he was a very evil-minded person, Tvadiya Namakshara Matra Vaibhava, the Namakshara, the glory of your letters, Lord's letters, solely by the glory of the Lord's letters, calling out the name, right? It came in front of him, Bhavadiya Parshadaha. So the messengers of the Lord came. And how they were dressed? Chaturbhujaha, they had 4 arms. Pitapata, so they were wearing yellow robes, yellow garments. Manorama, and they all had a very lovely appearance, right? Nice appearance. So even though he was evil-minded, just calling out the Lord's name, Bhagwan's name at the appropriate time, even when he was under stress or even when he was under extreme fear, and calling him, the messengers of the Lord appeared before him. So we go to stanza 5. Amum cha sampashya vikarshadho bhathan vimunchyatetyarurudhurbhaladami nivaritaste cha bhavajjanaistadha tadiya papam nikilam nyavedayan. So the messengers of Yama, right? Amum cha sampashya. So what they start doing is they start tying up Ajamila with ropes and start dragging him because they're ready to take him. And when they were doing that, Bhavat Janaihi Nivaritaha, the messengers of the Lord, they obstructed him, they blocked them and prevented him from taking him. And then they said, Vimunchiti, they said, release him, and then they stopped them by force and told the messengers of Yama to release Ajamila. And so when they stopped it, the Tadiya Papam Nikilam. So the Yama's messengers, they said, hold on, you're telling us not to take him. Let me give you a list of all the sins this person has actually done, right, in this life. And then they start narrating all the sins that Ajamila has actually done in this birth of his. Stanza 6. Bhavantu papani katam tu nishkrite krite pibho dandanamasti panditaha nanishkrite kim viditha bhavadrisham iti prabho tvatpurusha bhavashire. So panditaha, so the messengers of the Lords are calling the messengers of Yama panditaha, oh learned ones, right? You know everything, oh learned ones. Bhavantu papani, let there be sins. Yes, Ajamila has committed sins, so let there be sins. Whatever you said is all valid. But Katam tubo dandanamasti, how can there still be punishments when he's in nishkrite epi, when he's actually, when atonements has been made, when he's actually realizing all the mistakes he's done? This, is it not known to you? Is like, a nishkriti bhavadrisham, to people like you, is this something that you don't understand? That once he's actually done all these atonements, How can this sin still exist? Hasn't he just moved away from that? Iti prabho tvat purusha babashire. So your messengers, O Lord, said this, right? Talked this way to the messengers of Yama. Stanza 7. श्रुतिस्मृतिभ्यां विहिता व्रतादयः पुनन्ति पापं न लुनन्ति वासनाम् अनन्तसेवा तु निकृन्तते द्वयीम् इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भभाषिरे. So now let's look at why or how the atonement has been done in this case, right? So the examples they are giving here is Shruti Smriti Bhyam. So Shruti is something that what has been heard or communicated from the beginning. It's an unquestionable truth. It is something that is not, nobody wrote it, right? And it is what was been heard or communicated to the sages from the beginning. That's Shruti. Smriti is something which has been produced out of human intellect. So normally it is attributed to an author or somebody who wrote it, right? So Manu Smriti, Narada Smriti, a lot of Smriti. So these are Smritis are things which learned people wrote. Shruti is something that nobody knows who wrote it. The people have just heard it from the beginning, and that's how it's got translated. It's been passed on. So in Shruti Smriti Bhyam, in both the Shrutis and the Smritis, Vratadayaha Vihitaga, they have laid out all the vows, what needs to be done and everything, and how to engage in everything. So following all the vows that are laid out in that, Punanti Papam, it definitely removes every one person's sins. But now Lunanti Vasana, but it does not destroy their tendency to commit the sins again. So it kind of resets it, but it doesn't stop one person from going and committing the same sins again. However, Ananta Seva, to the service to the Lord alone, Nikrintati Dvaim, it not only destroys or cleanses you of all the sins you've done, but also prevents or stops you from committing further sins. Iti Prabho Tvatpurusha Babashire. So Lord, your messengers thus spoke. Stanza 8. अनेन भो जन्म सहस्रकोटिभिः कृतेषु पापेष्वपि निष्कृति कृता यदग्रहीन्नाम भयाकुलो हरेः इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भभाषिरे. So here, O messengers of Yama, because Ajamila uttered the name of Hare Nama, name of Hari, right, by calling Narayana, Bayakulaha, overcome by fear. Kriteshu papeshapi, even if he has committed sins, Janma Sahasra Koti Bihi, in Koti Janmam, in innumerable lives, right, if he has whatever sins he's actually committed, Nishkriti Krita, the atonement of that has already been done. So the kind of comparative thing I would say here is, if a person who's unaware of the potency of a certain medicine, right, he doesn't know how effective that medicine is. Let's say that person takes that medicine, it will act even without his knowledge, because the effect or the potency of the medicine does not depend on the patient understanding how the medicine actually works, right? So similarly, even though one person does not understand or respect or appreciate the value of chanting of the name, if one chants it knowingly or unknowingly, the chanting is still going to be effective. So that's what they say here, especially when he's calling out of fear, that the impact of that was higher. Stanza 9. नृणाम बुद्ध्यापि मुकुन्द कीर्तनं दहत्य घौघान् महिमास्यथादृशः यथाग्निरेधांसि यतौषधं गदान् इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भभाषिरे. So Mukunda Kirtanam, so when chanting the name of Mukunda when it's chanted, Nrinam Abudhyapi, when people chant it even unknowingly, Dahatya Gaugan, it burns out all the sins, just like Yathagni Redamsi, just like how fire is burning fuel, Yatha Aushadam Gadan, just like how medicine cures diseases. Then chanting of the name of Mukunda, knowingly or unknowingly, just eradicates all the sins. Mahima Asya Tadrishaha, such is the glory of the name. Thus, Iti Prabho Tvatpurusha Bapashire. Thus your emissaries, messengers spoke here. Stanza 10. इति ऋतैर्याम्य भटैरपाश्रुते भवद्भटानां च गणे तिरोहिते भवत्स्मृतिं कञ्चन कालमाचरन् भवत्पदं प्रापि भवद्भटैरसौ. So thus being told, Yamya Bhataihi, the messengers of Yama, they left, and Bhavat Bhatanamcha, they also left. The messengers of the Lord also left, and everybody just disappeared now. So Bhavat Smritim Acharan, so having remembrance of these, right, of what actually happened, Ajamila for Kanchana Kalam, for some time, Acharan, he was worshipping the Lord here. And eventually, Bhavat Bhatayasau, and then eventually the messengers of Lord came when the appropriate time for death came, and then they took him away. So, what the story here is, he started for Haridwar on the Ganges River, and there he stayed at a Vishnu temple and he practiced Bhakti Yoga for a few years, and then eventually he attained moksha with the Lord. Stanza 11. स्वकिङ्कराभेदनशङ्कितो ह्यमः त्वदङ्घ्रिभक्तेषु न गम्यतामिति स्वकीयभृत्यानशिशिक्षदुच्चकैः सधेव वातालयनाथ पाहि माम्. So meantime, Swakinkaravedana, so the messengers of Yama who now went back to Yamaloka and reported all of this to Lord Yama. So Yama then Ashishikshad Uchakaihi. So he's instructed in a very strict or a very stern voice to his messengers that na ghamyatamiti. So do not go near. Thwad angri bhakteshu. So people who are actually devotees of the Lord's feet. So whoever is a devotee of the feet of the Lord, do not go near them. And no, that's the strong instruction that Yama gave. So Sadeva Vatalayanata, oh, Lord Guruvarappa, you are of such mahimai, pahimam, please protect me from everything. Thus Bhattadripat ends Dashakam 22. Shri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha.